everybody. Happy Easter. It's me, Leslie Pivotal Plazic. And Zazoo Plazz. And my little gnome friend, my Easter tree. I'm back, day late, because I was celebrating Easter with my family. Yeah, so there's been a lot going on. So I put it off. It's Monday, like 12:30 in the morning on Tuesday morning. So yeah, there was a lot. I took Easter Sunday off because there's just no way I wasn't gonna rush and do this and try to have my Sunday breakfast. So I had Saturday. I had cooked. I didn't need to talk about this. But I had cooked. I'm emptying out the fridge, so clearing everything out before I do a new grocery order. And so I made the rest of the corned beef from St. Patty's Day that I didn't cook. I put it in the freezer, and I cooked the potatoes and everything. I was going to make hash because Easter is on 4/20. I know this is YouTube, but if you know, you know. Uh, so I'm going to make it tonight because, my dad texted me. Okay, so Easter Sunday, yeah, I get this text, 10:30 in the morning or so. Now, to his credit, my dad held off that long. He had probably just come back from Mass and he was getting impatient. When am I going to have my dinner? So he made my mother's holiday chicken, which is funny because I did a post about that on Facebook uh, last week and not even knowing he was going to make it. But, because usually we had, the family over, we'd always have ham and like scalloped potatoes and, asparagus, which is what my former spouse, GP, he made that, up at the house, and my youngest son went to eat with him. So my dad calls, he said, so they had their thing. My oldest son, get this, he's in Italy. He was at the Vatican on Friday with his girlfriend, and they saw the Sistine Chapel, and I guess that the Vatican was open because it's the Jubilee year or something. The 2025th anniversary of, where did I start with this? Anyway, oh yeah, the hash. I'm gonna make hash tonight. Yeah, so the Vatican, the 2025th anniversary of Jesus' incarnation. So they planned to do that months ago, and then we get news. So they were there. They were not there on Saturday or Sunday. I guess that Pope Francis had made an appearance. Easter Sunday. He didn't say the Mass, but he had made an appearance. And I, having been raised Catholic, and practicing Catholic for all these years, up until fairly recently, I've sort of transitioned a little bit. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. I've been baptized, had all of my sacraments. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, including 4 of Jesuit college, which is why Pope Francis was very special. To me personally, he was probably my favorite pope because he was the first Jesuit. And I was taught, I went to Boston College, which is, run by Jesuits. Yeah. And so, and so also our youngest son, his middle name is Francis, not for St. Francis. Um, and, my ex-husband's uncle was Francis. He became, a priest, but he took a different name. He took Harold as his name. But, we've always had, special, uh, you know, the in the Plazz family, it's always had a special devotion to Saint Francis, and he is the saint of nature and of animals and things. And my son here, his middle name is Francis, and he went into environmental science. So I'm not going to go into all this now. It comes up in my book. But these are just little things that I've noticed that are meaningful to me. And that's what I do. I sprinkle my observations in with current events to a point. I don't get, too into. This is humor, folks. Obviously, I'm wearing bunny ears. And I did see they have pierogi peeps now. No, they don't, but it's a meme. It's funny. Um, anyway, oh yeah, the hash. Yeah. So, the world found out today that Pope Francis, um, had passed away at 88. My dad's going to be 88 in 4 days. But they were born in different years. But, I guess he had been sick and he had, he was, but it's miraculous. Really, if you think about it, how he came back from being so sick and he delivered his message. And the day after Easter, I mean, that's a testimony to, his life and his soul, what he came here to do, and all the good and all the people who loved him. So, keeping him, I'm dedicating this Zazoo report to his memory, and um, you know, many blessings and peace to all the world's Catholics who are honoring him and celebrating his life this week. And then we have Easter, of course, the joyful occasion of Jesus' resurrection, which we celebrate every year. So, I talk about the readings a little bit every week, but, I tie them into pop music. So, okay, Zazoo, get to it. Yeah. All right. Yes, I'm going to keep the bunny ears on the whole time in case you were wondering, because I like them. Oh, yeah. So, the other thing that happened on a lighter note, yeah. So, I was gonna go over. So I'm going over my dad's, and I said, "Oh, I didn't get a cake, like, because my youngest son said, oh, he was off playing basketball or something, and then he was gonna see his girlfriend, and he wanted to stop by Papa's house, wanted to know when I was gonna be there. I said, I gotta get a dessert or something, because my dad just made, God bless him. He just made enough chicken for like the two of us, and he made like this apple turnover thing. He had like a sheet of pie dough, and he put some apples in the like spices, and he just like folded it over. My dad, he's funny. Oh, I got to show off my Easter socks. It says, "Let's get excited, excited." Yeah. So, and I'm thinking that's not going to cut it. But of course, the kid, they were full because they had probably gone to her house. I don't know. They had a whole bunch of food. But I said, okay. So I checked all the supermarkets were closed. Then I see the Carvel ice cream shop is wide open. Let's go in there. The guy's like, oh, we sold the bunnies. All the bunnies are gone yesterday. There were many people in here buying bunny cake. I said, oh, do you have birthday cake? Because it's my dad's birthday and my son's birthday. So he wrote on the cake, happy birthday, everything. And so I brought that. I don't know if it was kind of fun because they both blew out their candles at the same time, and it was nice. That he stopped by. I got to see the new truck, got to meet the girlfriend. It was very nice. And she's, they have the same piercings. They got the same ring through their lower lip, which, that's got to be a match, made in heaven, because they got. And I noticed he had a couple of new tattoos. He's got like a horned beast or something on the back of his left calf. And he had like I don't know, something else over here, skull or flower or something. I didn't react. I'm beyond that. He's 22. Anyway, so we had a nice time. We took some pictures. My dad, He's still getting the hang of using the cell phone to take pictures. Puts his finger down, he takes like 30 pictures at once. I think he only took 10 this time. At our older son's graduation, he took 45. It took me a month to delete them all. Hopefully he'll get up to speed by the last graduation. But it might not be the last one because our son might be going, he's graduating from UConn in a couple weeks. 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then he's thinking about going out west. He's got some opportunities to maybe do a master's program and a PhD out west somewhere, maybe in the Rocky Mountains. We're not sure yet. We'll see. Okay, so I did that. All right. Did I talk about all the news? I think I got all the news. Yeah. So we have, the typical readings for Easter Sunday. We've heard them all millions of times, but there's a focus on Peter, of course, on Easter, who was, the apostle, the first pope. He was, chosen by Jesus. He was the leader, among all of the apostles. So, he's, Paul and the Acts of the Apostles. He's talking about how Peter and all the apostles are witnesses to all that. They were chosen in advance by God, and all the prophets, were predicting that all this was going to happen. So, it's interesting that the Pope, of course, is part of the line of Peter. So it's kind of, the fact that he passed right after Easter. If you know anything about Catholic tradition, this is very meaningful. And the fact that, Pope Francis was such a simple person, he didn't want all this pomp and circumstance and fancy stuff. He cared about, he wanted to exemplify that, the humility. And I love that. The things that he chose, even to where he was going to be buried, were meaningful. So when they talk about the apostles, the witnesses chosen in advance, it's kind of like, how our souls, we, deliberately choose things, where we're going to be born and the lessons we're going to learn. And things don't always go according to plan. But, this is along the lines of what I'm talking about. How the Pope, of course he chose, and probably on some level, he knew when he was going to die, and it all fit with the rest of his life. But he's, not only popes do that, they do it on a very public level, but the rest of us do it too. We don't remember it. Our soul, had a meeting before we came down here, and it was all commissioned ahead of time. What lessons we were going to learn, who we're going to meet. People aren't, and they certainly don't talk about this in church, but it's part of taking responsibility for your own spiritual development to know this. There are all these little secrets that you have to do your own research, kids. Right? They say this is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice in it. Okay, so they talk about the stone rejected by the builders becoming the cornerstone. So I guess it's all about rejoicing on Easter. Jesus risen. So it's being the message is you've died to your old self, you've died to your old habits, and now you're going to take on a new life and new habits. And so the whole stone rejected by he's talking about. So I guess originally in Psalms, the people of Israel were, they were originally rejected, but they became the cornerstone of God's plan. And then Jesus came along. He was rejected by them, by his own people, and then he became the new cornerstone. So it's significant. if you know anything about the Bible, it's it's interesting. So yeah, and then there's this Colossians reading, Paul to the Colossians. Seek what is above, not of the earth, right? So you can't, in other words, you can't serve two masters, right? Um, you know, where where your attention goes, you know, that's where God is. That's what flourishes, right? So if your attention is on higher things, your purpose, right? The things that are not going to pass away. In other words, the things that you learn and how your soul grows in this life, you take that with you, right? Um, the things of earth, you know, they're necessary for your survival here, but they're not necessarily the things that are going to last, right? Everything decays, everything of earth, right? Our bodies, everything. So, how do you spend your time? So, see what is above. So, in the present moment, you can decide how you're going to spend your time. Where is your energy going? You know? Um, yeah. So then, there's the reading the gospel for John chapter 20. Mary Magdalene, right? She's a woman is the first one to go to the tomb. She's the first one to go to Jesus's tomb, right? And I just want to say, it's interesting, that Pope Francis had always been, supportive of women, you know, I guess sisters, or women serving as lay people in the church. But he stuck to the party line as far as women becoming priests. So that was interesting. But there's all kinds of biblical history that Mary Magdalene was very, uh, you know, despite her, how what we were taught at school, she was, she was, also a witness and a very close friend of Jesus. So, there's that. She's running. You know, she could have been, the closest friend to him. The one, she knew his teachings as well as the other ones, if not better. There's a gospel of Mary Magdalene. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that now. But so she runs, then she goes and gets, Peter and the other disciple, who runs and beats Peter. But then Peter goes in the tomb and he sees the cloths, the head lying separately, the head cloth. I always wondered about that, how it's separate. But yeah, so I picked up on this line. Um, Yeah, in the psalm it says, the stone, about the stone and the cornerstone. It says, "By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes." So I thought, oh, that's perfect. In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel. I mean, not only is it by Peter Gabriel, Peter, St. Peter is perfect. If you watch the video, which I'm going to put the link down, um, Peter, as far as the Pope and all that. But one of the lines it is the doorway to 1,000 churches. In your eyes. It's a romantic kind of ballad. But like I say, all these songs can be viewed in a spiritual way. Not so much religious, but the fact, what's interesting in this particular song, I gotta say this, it blew my mind. Let me take my ears off. Give the bunnies a rest. Yeah. So what blew my mind was in the video you see a church. You see Jesus, and there's a cup, and there's these black figures and black birds and things. Um, yeah. So working so hard for our survival, and that corresponds to, the earthly things, right? In the, the light, the heat. You start, it's not only a song about a relationship. There's that. There's a woman in the thing, but if you look at it from a higher point of view, it's just about this. It's about seeking the higher things. Getting so tired working for our survival. You know, looking for transcendence, looking for spiritual renewal. It's perfect. They ran the Boston Marathon yesterday, so but the song came. I was in Boston when this song came out. It was let's see, it was released August of as a single, August of '86. I was going into my senior year of college. It was the second single from his Fifth Soul album. So, remember So? Yeah, so it was the second single released in the U.S. It was on MTV, the video. Got to number one on the Rock Tracks Billboard on September 13th, '86. And it was hit number 20, went up to 26 on the Billboard 100 by November of that year, my 21st birthday. So I guess it was the finale on his Secret World Live World Tour. That was a good one. And in the Say Anything movie with John Cusack. So what's interesting and relevant to my experience is it was inspired by a trip to the Sagrada Familia. Um, it's it's a cathedral in Barcelona. I was there. I went the summer of '85 when I studied in Spain with a bunch of other students through it was through UConn. We were from all different colleges, but it was like a summer program. We actually were immersed in Spanish culture and learning about all aspects of Spanish life. And we studied in Madrid, but we went to Barcelona. We saw this church, and the thing was that it was by Gaudi. His name was the architect artist who he didn't finish the cathedral. It's been years and years and it hasn't been finished. But recently they decided to finish it, and before he passed, Pope Francis declared that Antonio Antoni Gaudi, he's going to be named blessed and possibly a saint. So and that cathedral and one other one inspired Peter Gabriel to write a song called Sagrada, which was scrapped, but some of the vocals and chords went into this song, In Your Eyes. I just posted about my pictures from that cathedral this week on my Facebook page because it's been 40 years since we went. In May, we went, 85. So I'm seeing all these little ends getting tied up. Yeah. So this is a real emotional song. I guess Yusu, Nador, Yasu. He did a duet with him. I'm not pronouncing his name right, but it's like Yusu Indoor. Yeah, he's the guy who in the background. It's good. It's a good duet. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here today. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of in the song he talks about there's so much wasted, so much pain, right? And you look around and you can't help but think that. But you know, there's hope. It's a hopeful song too. In your eyes, there's hope. In other words, if you focus on the hopeful things, the things that light you up, the people, the relationship, whatever it is, your creativity, anything you do that brings you joy, right? If you focus on that, that's what gets you through. You know? Like Pope Francis, he was lifted up by ministering to people, cleaning the, by the common. But he didn't he he was, all about the everyday person, the people, the forgotten, right? The sick, the lonely, the imprisoned, the people who needed love, people who needed, God's blessing, to know that they were loved, to know that they were, blessed by God, and that every life is, important and special and beloved, by God. So that's all I have to say today. I'm gonna get a little hoarse here. Gonna go have my usual snack, paleo hot chocolate, and make my hash. So I'm gonna sign off a little bit early this week. My spider's back, Charlotte. She paid me a visit last week. So I will take care. Have a great week. Enjoy the spring weather, and don't eat too much Easter chocolate. Spread it out. Some people say that all they could find were black jelly beans. I never liked those. I used to give them to my dad or my husband to eat because never the taste, and they turn your mouth black. So I didn't care for those. But all the other stuff is pretty good. So I'm gonna take off. Till next week. See you next week. Same place, different time. Take care.